Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Ad Astra Kansas Money Talks podcast. I'm Joe Blubaugh and joined as always by Mark Johnson and Bob Schwartz.
Good morning.
Of Bob Schwartz Financial. And they have offices in Victoria and Silver Lake, Kansas. You can always find out more about them at bobschwartzfinancial.com. And of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, or we'd like for you to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, or if you're watching us on your favorite podcast platform, give us a review. That really helps with the algorithm. We appreciate all of that. And if you've watched us before, we obviously talk about money, and we love to find topics that are specific to Kansas. Sometimes it's just general information, but today we definitely have a topic that is specific to Kansas. And kind of leading into that, you know, there are rural areas across the nation that are facing some pretty serious population decline, and Kansas is definitely, not immune to that. So some of our small towns across the state are, looking for ways to attract people to come to their towns. And we're going to talk about a little town in southeast Kansas called Neodesha, and they have a unique program that they have implemented that is really getting some attention, and all in the goal of bringing folks to their town and kind of changing the landscape of their declining population. So, Mark, maybe you could tell us a little bit about kind of what they're doing, and then we'll kind of go into some of the thoughts.
Okay, so the first thing I'd say is Neodesha in their article that they published through the Wichita Eagle and some of these other news agency, they use this term called they want to make sure their community is not becoming brain dead or brain drained, and that's really where like small towns are struggling with retaining their young professionals. They're going to Wichita, they're going to Kansas City, they're going to Lawrence, they're going to Topeka, Manhattan. But really, those are, or maybe even Hayes. But besides that, they're not really retaining young professionals in these small little towns. So with their declining population, they're struggling to keep young professionals. Neodesha is their city leaders are trying like this new incentive program to try to get people to move back to Neodesha. And so they're offering some pretty significant incentives to come and live in Neodesha, Kansas.
Yeah, let's to kind of preset it. What happened a few years ago, maybe 20 years ago to 10 years ago, small towns would not give away ground. They would give a lot if someone would build on it within a year or so. And I don't think that was very successful. And I think what Neodesha has kind of taken another step in this process and have come up with some really interesting ideas.
And what's interesting to me, at least, was, and we'll get into some of these incentives that they're offering. Once we start to talk about it, you'll see they have a very targeted demographic that they're going for, and it is truly the young generation, and they're looking for professional people to live in their community. Yeah,
exactly. So the incentive breakdown, so what they're actually offering, they're offering $15,000 in student loan repayment assistance, 100% Kansas state income tax waiver through 2026, college scholarship incentives up to $25,000, and then additional perks like a family pass to local water park, school activity passes, and Chamber of Commerce event tickets.
It's that's quite the package, potential package for somebody who is interested in finding a place that maybe is a little bit slower pace of life. Maybe they live out on one of the coast where it's very, very expensive. And Mark, I think you had mentioned that a lot of the inquiries that they've received have come from out of state.
Yeah, in the article it talked about the majority of their inquiries were coming from really high cost states that I'm sure there are people looking at, opportunities where, first of all, you get some loans paid off. Maybe second, you can help your kids pay for college. But, I'm sure when they get on Zillow or Realtor.com and they look at the houses in Neodesha, Kansas, I'm sure there's a little bit of a difference between that and where they live now. Because I'm sure the median house, I didn't look, but I'm sure the median house in Neodesha is probably in the hundreds of thousands, $100-some thousand instead of 400.
Probably average 180,000 for a house or something like that. See, I think the perfect part there is if somebody has a lot that they're going to give, a city's going to give away some lots if you build on them. In rural Kansas, who's going to build there? Who's got the
Older
money?
people that have money, yeah.
Right. Well, the farmer that's moving, the farmer and his wife that are moving to town, the ag producer that wants to move to town. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's great that they're moving to town. But you have somebody that's moving to town, and they're going to spend money in town, but maybe for 25, 30 years. You get a 25-year-old couple, professional couple, to move in, or have to be professional. Somebody that has young children moving into town. You've got 50 or 60 years of them being consumers, of them being in the tax base, and them hopefully falling in love with your town.
Right. And you mentioned something as well, children. Because in a lot of these small towns, I grew up in small towns. Up until I was the age of 16, the biggest town I ever lived in was 300 people. And these small towns are defined by their school system. It's their biggest employer. It's the town's identity. And in a lot of these small communities, they're faced with that dreaded C word, which is consolidation, and bringing young families in that have children that will be in the school district. That really helps there as they get more and more students.
Because what happened in rural Kansas happened in rural America, and what my generation, when we were kids, get an education, and so maybe one kid stayed home, and all the rest of the kids moved to Kansas City or Dallas or Wichita, and they were done, and they were gone from that community. And now we've got all these empty spaces. And Neodesha's, it'll be fun to watch this, because this could get some traction. And, it's close to Independence. It's close to Highway 400 and Highway 75, which is not a major intersection of trucking in America, but certainly an important one. And I could see, wow, if I wanted to own a semi and be someplace where I could get that semi on the road pretty quick, that'd be a pretty good place.
Well, it's good to see, like, Neodesha, and there's, Southeast Kansas, some of these towns down there have really been hurt by, the refineries closing, the coal mines closing, and people just moved out of these communities to survive, to go live, to go find a new job. So, these places have to do something to try to attract people and hopefully create some new businesses, to create some new opportunities for people to stay down there in that area.
And you've kind of touched on it, but maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the concerns that I think, and some of the challenges that maybe this program is potentially going to have. One of the challenges that has been in Kansas for years and years and years is it takes a special person to want to live in a rural area, that wants that slower pace of life. That in Southeast Kansas, you are quite a ways away from major metropolitan areas. I mean, this town is a couple of hours away from Wichita. Tulsa's probably
75 miles.
Yeah,
so it's not bad.
Not bad, but
no, I'm sorry, 90 miles.
Yeah,
sorry.
You've got a little bit of a travel to get to a major population center for entertainment and things like that. So that might be one of the challenges that they're facing.
The perception that rural education's not as good, and that's a perception, as Joe and I will say, because we went to small schools, most of our careers. But that's another perception of people in the city. Well, if my child goes to Washburn Rural, they're going to get a better education than they are at Silver Lake, Kansas. But I don't agree with that, but there are those that believe that strongly, and they have every right to it. But I think there's a lot of us that want to live in rural areas. It's just sometimes your clarity at the age of 25 is
a little bit different than But your age or mine.
Yeah, I don't want to be 90 miles from Tulsa. I'm 25 years old. I want to be where I can go have fun. Yeah.
I look at some of those towns that size that can still, that are far enough away that you still have a lot of things. You have restaurants, mom and pop restaurants. You have actual shops in your town still. When you're still an hour and a half away or an hour away from places, you can actually have a business, and be successful with it. Where, like where we live 6 miles, we live 6 miles outside Topeka. It's hard for businesses, when you can just travel to Topeka for everything.
Right.
And so I don't know, I think that this is a great, these type of communities, I think, should have a revival with people being able to work from home and, I don't know, not have to go into the office every single day.
Yep.
I can really see like these smallish towns that still, are big enough to where they have a town square with businesses in every shop. I think that's going to become a popular thing again, or at least I hope it does.
Everybody thought Amazon, Walmart put a lot of businesses out of business.
Yep.
And everybody thought Amazon was going to take it to the next step. And in essence, it didn't, because what Amazon did was it allowed the small vendor to vend through Amazon if they wanted to. Now, I don't know what the strings are there. I've heard they're not really good, but then that's allowed that small vendor to be in a small spot in a rural type community and not have to depend on their total income coming from that shop. Mm-hmm. And so I think somebody that's an entrepreneurial thinker could come up and like you just said, I think going forward, it's going to become more important to people to do business there and to do business in small communities.
Well, and another thing that is unique is, we're still on the heels of COVID, and I think we're still seeing how that changed landscape after COVID will impact rural parts of the nation. Kansas, being specific, because people found that they didn't need to live where they worked in a lot of cases.
Right.
They could work anywhere, or they could live anywhere and still work. I always liked, we've mentioned here before that I am a real estate agent, and one specific story that I thought was just so unique was I was helping somebody sell their house, and the buyers of the house were from Oregon, and they worked for the state of Oregon, and they were moving to Kansas because of the cost of living, and they were retaining their jobs with the state of Oregon, but they were going to be living and working in Kansas. So I just found
amazing?
that so unique.
Yeah.
And
for the state of Oregon.
For the state of Oregon. And so it really drove home to me the fact that, people can live anywhere pretty much now. Based on what job they have and that ability to telework. But a lot of folks were leaving those areas where the cost of living was so high, and that's one of the advantages that we have in Kansas is the fact that our cost of living and specifically housing cost, in comparison to those areas is so low.
We've seen a lot, I'd say the initial effect was that tons of people moved to Florida and Texas for the tax incentives. And now I feel like, I still think people are going to do that, but I think people are going to start looking beyond that option and being like, okay, what's actually the cheapest place in general? Like, what are cheaper places in general to live? And, I think Kansas and some other states might benefit from that.
And we are seeing the Kansas legislature start to take up some of those issues to try to put us in a more competitive spot on those taxes with other states. Still a work in progress at this point. We won't dive into that. But looking back at some of the concerns that our rural communities have, and Neodesha in specific, is, how do you retain people? Maybe you can get them to move there, but you've got to have a job base and things like that. So some of this teleworking, some of this teleworking might help with that, but there's still going to be some long-term concerns of whether they can keep people there too, I would think.
Yeah. If you're someone though that lives in that community, I'd be happy that my city's trying to be proactive.
Absolutely.
Trying to be proactive, and I'm sure you could pull people, and there's people that are going to be upset. They're giving this money away, blah blah blah. but I'd rather see my community try to thrive again than let it just continue to get smaller.
And I'm going to get political for a second or for a while, because I think our state tax policy has held back our state for years. And, and I think it's held back Nebraska. And, when they take away taxes on Social Security, I can't tell you how many clients I have that do not domicile in Kansas anymore, so they don't have to pay so they have to pay tax on their Social Security. We recently got rid of that. Our tax on the higher end has gone down, and there's talk of getting that under control. Now I'm going to reverse the ship. We need to spend more on education to get people, on public education, to get people in here. Because not everybody wants to homeschool or send their kid to a private school. And we've got to continue to educate the mass like we always have, not less than we always have.
Well, we don't have that many options. We look at where in South, there's not that many private schools in areas
Right.
of our state.
Right.
And
Right.
you want to make that claim, but like you said earlier, our public schools are the heart of most of our small communities.
Yep. Yeah. And then that brings me to, do you want to get people to move in? Yeah. You want to get your infrastructure back up. Start giving houses away in these communities that are empty. And I know people own those houses. Cities, go to them, work out a deal, purchase the house, and then give it to somebody that is a legal citizen, a legal resident of our state, and working, and have a job, have a family, and you can repopulate these towns, because there's people living in places that they can't afford, or and they have to keep the house up. Maybe you keep the deed for 2 years, but start having some proactive things that way. I love what Neodesha is doing, but if we want to fill the state back up, there's a plan.
Our state's built off of the Homestead Act,
Yeah.
And the Homestead Act, the first thing is, you have to live there. You have to make it better, and,
Work the land.
Homestead Act 2.0, like, hey, we're going to give you this. You have to make it better. You have to work in your community. Like, I think that's a great thing. That's as American as it can be. That's as Kansas as it can be.
Yep.
I mean, this is what we were built from. So I totally agree with that.
Well, I like that, because now we're getting into policy
Yeah.
that could be a game changer for this state.
Yep.
And I think of how many, when I go to Garden in Dodge City area and see how many, the percentage of Mexican Americans. I don't know if they're Americans. I don't know if they're working on becoming Americans. But when I see the numbers of them and the numbers of small communities around them, Holcomb is still vibrant, Lakin is still vibrant, but then there's other communities that are just drying up. And I sit there and think, these are hard-working, go-to-church families that would love an opportunity like that and take advantage of it. And even Northeast Kansas. I mean, there's places that they need people. They need, yeah.
Yeah, there are definitely some policy issues that could help some of these small towns. And Mark, in this article, it talked about the fact that beyond the incentives, Neodesha is trying to do some other things to continue to make the town vibrant and remain vibrant, and try to keep people there once they get there. They're trying to put more money into their parks, into restoring some of their historic buildings, trying to create new housing opportunities. And then their whole idea is they want to create a better quality of life in their town to rival the other communities their size, so they kind of stand out. So I think that's great. Those are what young families want. They want to see great parks. They want to see places for something, their kids to go do downtown. I think back, my wife's from Hayes. I love going to Hayes,
because it's a small town, but I always feel like there's something for my kids to do when we're there. There's great parks. There's little things to do, and that Hayes is obviously bigger than Neodesha, but that town has been growing, and, they have a lot of jobs there, but
Sure.
there's always things to do for young families. And so, from Topeka to Hayes, usually I'm like, there's almost feels like more to do there, and I really appreciate when smaller towns really try to, really lean on those things.
Well, and the thing about Hayes is it's kind of like the anchor out in Northwest Kansas. It is the big town, and it's not a big town, but for Northwest Kansas, it's
the
a big
Wichita.
town.
It's the
Right.
Wichita
Right.
of that area.
Yeah.
And you have Pittsburgh down in southeast Kansas, but it's like way, way southeast. And there is an opportunity for a town like Neodesha to become that anchor town in southeast Kansas, because they also don't have large population centers in the southeast part of the state. So there's definitely an opportunity there.
Yep.
One of the things that, with my background, I have a communications background. It's interesting. They've obviously gone on the offense trying to get the word out about their opportunity. It'll be interesting to see if they can utilize social media and some of the communication tools to start telling success stories if they do start to get some momentum to keep that up through the years.
Yeah, I totally agree. It'll be interesting if they keep up that tax incentive too. If they keep doing that year after year, it's going to show that maybe it is working.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
If they keep that up, that means it's getting traction.
yeah.
Yeah, and what's interesting is with a lot of these small towns, the tax base is pretty small as well. And I just happen to be a city council member on our small town, and we're probably a little bit smaller even than Neodesha. And it will be interesting, and if they can make this successful, it could be the blueprint for other small towns to see maybe some short-term pain up front in your tax base, and but with a vision on the long-term success of the town. So obviously, best of luck to Neodesha as they go forward with this incentive. One thing we haven't talked about was there is a partnership that they have with, and it's kind of how people can apply for these incentives. So maybe, Mark, you can give us a quick overview of that before we wrap this up.
Yeah, it's called makemymove.com. I've actually seen there before where they have a website that, they partner with these communities to get people to, pretty much show off what they have, what their incentives are. But yeah, if you're someone that's listening to this and wants to make your move to Neodesha, Kansas, or interested, that's the website, makemymove.com. And you're you'll see other communities like them that are trying to attract new people.
All right. Well, definitely a unique and great opportunity for not only Neodesha, but many rural communities across Kansas. Hopefully this works for them and becomes a blueprint in this, unique opportunities. So,
Exactly.
Gentlemen, thanks again. A great topic today. I loved maybe a little bit off the beaten path from what we normally do, but thank you very much. Once again, if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, give us a thumbs up. We would really appreciate that. And on your favorite podcast platform, if you could give us a review, we would thank you for that as well. And if you would like more information about what these gentlemen do, BobSchwartzFinancial.com is the place to go to. And of course, once again, they have offices in Victoria, Kansas, and here in Silver Lake, Kansas. Until next time, thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you.